I want to touch on the topic again about DID. I was recently asked if I think Cecilia's display of DID, especially when she posed herself as a wild animal, basically, on all fours, clawing the floor, growling, ready to attack, if that was actually demon possession in motion. Now, as I mentioned in that previous audio, I wasn't there for the event. The details and everything of it was just related to me from Ria. But with everything else I had have experienced with Cecilia, I highly doubt that this had anything to do with demon possession. Simply because Cecilia was always completely aware of what she was doing at all times. Every time there was a supposed DID switch where she was supposed to be unconscious and someone else was taking control of her body, Cecilia always recalled every detail of that event, which proved she did not switch. And for every other event that was even that could even be closely related to demon possession in itself, with regards to changing into a werewolf, being a vampire, and other events that I still have yet to relate. Cecilia was always aware of them. Now, with pure demon possession, a demon basically takes over the person's body and the person is unaware of what's going on. As far as I know, there are rare circumstances where the person is aware but they're completely not in control of their body or their actions. But for the vast majority of the time, also as far as I know, with demon possession, the person has no idea what's going on. I mean, after I had left Cecilia, I had spoken with someone who used to have events where a demon would take over his body. And he had these scenarios related to him for the disastrous things that would happen. And he had absolutely no memory of them, yet there was plenty of evidence. And these scenarios were catastrophic, but not like, well, let's just say not like Cecilia, where he went and killed people. It was more scenarios where it was his voice changing to becoming extremely deep and, basically demonic sounding. The very sound of his voice would send shivers up your spine. And then he would become violent and start throwing things and making threats, and pretty much, I suppose, if you could say, look at the movies, it would be something similar to that. Not the exaggerated movies, but the ones that are more, I suppose if you could look at maybe The Exorcist, it would be something like that, where the person's voice would change. I mean, a woman's voice would suddenly become a male voice, and the male voice was exceptionally disturbing. That's what happened to him, and he had to obviously undergo a lot of counseling and prayer and so on, where the demon had to be cast out of him, and then it never happened again. But in the events where a demon would take over his body, he was completely unaware of what was going on. And apparently even his eyes changed. The very look in his eyes was completely pitch black. I mean, there's an array of different symptoms for, when someone is demon possessed. You can see it. It's it's disturbing. Let's just put it that way. And I've personally witnessed a couple of scenarios where people were demon possessed. I mean, there was one scenario where there was this very young woman, and she was tiny. She was very short, and a demon completely took over her body. Her voice changed, her eyes changed, and this little woman picked up a man who was taller than her, bigger than her, a couple of feet off the air, with one hand. Now, without a doubt, that's demonic. How can this little woman with one hand do all of those things? And in the same scenario, this woman had absolutely no idea what had happened during that time period. And again, it was incredibly disturbing to witness. I mean, I don't think witnessing anyone who's demon-possessed can leave you unscarred, basically. It's quite something to witness. I mean, it sends shivers up your spine, and there's actually no words for it. But with the events where I have personally seen demon possession in action, if you would like to put it that way, and with other people who I've spoken to who have also seen demon possession or who have previously been demon possessed, none of those circumstances or situations, the person ever recalled what was going on. And there was always these unnatural abilities where, like I said in the one example, they had this incredible strength, which was completely unnatural for that specific person's body. Their voice would completely change. The look in their eyes would completely change. There was quite a list of things. But when it came to Cecilia, none of those things applied to her. She was always aware of every scenario that happened. I mean, in the times where she would claim that she knew nothing of what had just happened at that moment, she would always later slip up and say something to where none of us had ever even mentioned details of the event. She basically gave herself away. And even with her supposed DID switches, there was no change in the look in her eyes. And if a demon took over her body, especially for being a woman, her voice would have been dramatically different, because the demon always tends to be, well, basically male sounding. So her voice would have changed to that of a male's, basically, but just far more dark and disturbing. And she would have had these very visible, unnatural abilities with strength and all sorts of things. But there was never a scenario like that. I mean, for me personally, I would completely rule out pure demon possession when it comes to Cecilia herself. She could never ever claim that the devil made me do it. But in terms of the things that she did do, I mean, killing people or orchestrating murders and so many other things, there was definitely a demonic influence, but she was still in control. She could still say no. She still could stop herself from doing these things, but she happily went along. I mean, I might even go as far as saying she was probably telling the demons what to do, because she was always the one giving the instructions for absolutely everything. She was just that domineering and that controlling. But pure demon possession, definitely not. But demon influenced, yes, I would say that would be a part of it. I mean, who on earth could actually know so much about the occult and speak so sadistically and orchestrate such heinous murders and crimes and do all these things without some kind of dark influence? That would be impossible. So basically, that would be my answer. Cecilia's DID and everything else about her was not pure demon possession. There was no one else. There was no one taking control of her body. She was always in full control of her own actions and her own words. But there obviously was dark influence. And I know this is also one topic that has kept me and left me wondering for quite a long time now, is I wonder if she did at least dabble or try or experiment with some type of Satanism, some type of witchcraft, because I mean, that puzzle piece does fit. She far too easily bragged about supposed abilities which she never had, but she knew far too much, and she did extremely sadistic things. So there's a lot of factors that I have mentioned and have yet to mention that would indicate that there is a very big possibility that she did at least dabble in Satanism. But I honestly don't know. But at the same time, I guess I do know, because during investigation, there was evidence and even victims' families. I think these victims were not mentioned in trial as well, but the family members spoke of these people who Cecilia would basically train them in occult practices, in Satanism, in doing sacrifices and all sorts. One of these was actually the samurai sword killings at the school in Krugersdorp. Part of the initiation or part of the tribute to Satan for that kid was to go and kill with a samurai sword. Cecilia was training this kid in satanic practices. And I know I still have to touch on that topic later, but there is also another scenario where another boy was also being trained in satanic practices by Cecilia, but he wanted to leave. And that ended exceptionally badly for him. That was a horrendous scenario on its own, which I will also later speak about. But let's just say he did not survive in trying to leave Cecilia. But the point I am trying to get at is that Cecilia was training at least some people in satanic practices. So, yeah, I guess she was practicing Satanism. But again, going back to the question of it being demon possession, I still highly doubt it, because, like I said, she was always fully in control. But there was definitely evil and exceptionally dark influences. So basically, at the end of all of it, with taking into account the dark influences, evil influences, whatever you would like to call it, the rest of what Cecilia did was basically masterful acting at the end of the day in order to pull off everything. I mean, for example, who gets down on all fours, pretends to be a wild animal, clawing the ground, growling, ready to pounce and attack, while still being fully aware of her actions and pulling it all off so masterfully, as if she was really a wild animal. I mean, that's just brilliant acting. And even with the other things that I personally experienced with her supposed switches, with her supposed health scares, the list of things that she did that was so convincing was brilliant acting. I mean, really, it was beyond masterful. It was you were hopelessly fooled, because she did it so perfectly. The only problem is for Cecilia, with having more and more people come into her group and basically telling each person a different lie for the same scenario, same story. And with time going on and on, you cannot, it's impossible to remember the detail of every single lie that you've told, especially when the lies are different to each and every single person. And this is also how she started getting caught out towards the end with other people. After a couple of years, I mean, she started mixing the lies telling or relating one lie to one person, which was actually a lie for another person. She was mixing the lies between the people because she had forgotten who she told what to. And when this was pointed out to her, she resorted to claiming that she had amnesia, that her father and the occult inflicted amnesia on her, and this is why she can't remember. I mean, I suppose what other excuse could she come up with to quickly back up her excuse for lying and being caught out? And I honestly know that even for myself, so I can only imagine for the public who was not part of this, but I know for myself and for those who knew Cecilia, this whole whirlwind of events that happened, all the nonsense and lies that were told, it's confusing. It is honestly confusing, because there's some things that are so bizarre that none of us can deny actually happened and is actually the truth. And then there are some things that we can definitely say are lies, obviously, but it's such a mix and match of things between everything from start to finish that I don't think, honestly, even myself and those involved could make complete sense of anything or tie up anything exactly or properly. But then again, the question that just posed in my mind now is that I wonder if Cecilia herself could even tie up these lies, because it was becoming so twisted, so distorted, so exaggerated, so random. But yet there are so many questionable events that would indicate that to some extreme or some degree, some of these things were actually true. Like, when I was relating now for satanic practices, even though she wasn't raised in the occult, she apparently did claim when she was in high school that she was this very masterful satanic person. So it started all the way back then. But she was never raised in the occult. So some of these things were true, some not true. You basically have to divide everything that she said and everything that happened with a very fine-tooth comb, with the desperate hope of making some sense in all of this. Because, I mean, if I have to explain or sum up the whole scenario with Cecilia Steyn in one phrase, it's basically a spider web put into a blender. Because there's so many things that lead to so many other things, and they're all tied together. But at the same time, there's a lot of things that just still don't make sense. And I'm even just thinking about the whole astraling events that I've related and the ones that I haven't. I still can't wrap my mind around them. And even with everything that was tangible that happened with Cecilia Steyn, it makes me feel delusional for even remembering or experiencing these things, because it's so bizarre, for a lack of a better word. But I've basically gone off topic now. So, back onto the topic. Pure demon possession with regards to DID and anything else that Cecilia did? No. Demonic and dark influences? Yes. But Cecilia was in control, so she could still say no. And obviously did not say no. But at the end of the day, it was exceptionally brilliant acting in every aspect.